Very good morning, Gordon, and many thanks for accepting this invitation for this Zoom meeting. I have to say, you are one of the most dedicated Freemasons I ever met in my Masonic life. I was initiated 24 years ago, and it's an honor to have you in this Zoom meeting because you organized 61, I think, or 60 Zoom meetings, and it's a fantastic work.
Thank you.
Gordon is the Right Worshipful Master of Hope of Kurrachee Lodge within the Grand Lodge of Scotland, and I had the pleasure and the honor to join almost every meeting, every Zoom meeting organized by him. Thank you again, Gordon.
No, my
Both
pleasure.
for accepting and for organizing. So it's been more than a year since you organized Zoom meetings. It's a great way to deal with pandemic. How did the Grand Lodge of Scotland view your initiative, Gordon?
I'm very lucky in that the Grand Lodge of Scotland, our constitution and laws devolves a lot of responsibility down to the daughter lodges, and we're very democratic in that way. I've also been lucky enough to know many of the senior office bearers of the Grand Lodge of Scotland, and I'm privileged to have been elected onto Grand Committee in 2018. And at the time the pandemic was coming about, the Grand Lodge of Scotland were looking at various ways in which they could support the brethren. And there was a variety of discussions in the early stages. What could we do? What can't we do? However, I'd been using Zoom technology and Microsoft Teams technology at my work for quite a number of months. Because my work team's very disparate around Scotland. And when my mother lodge decided to postpone our meetings, and then our provincial Grand Lodge and Grand Lodge followed suit, I felt that there was a need to ensure that we were still communicating with our brethren, keeping them together. At that time, I do not think any one of us thought we would still be in the same position 13, 14 months later. I'd just taken, I was coming to the end of my tenure as Right Worshipful Master of the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee, the research lodge in the province of Fife and Kinross. We normally only meet 4 times a year, and we have 3 lecturers and our installation meeting. And as the master of the lodge, it is your responsibility to find those 3 lecturers. One of them has to be yourself, and you present the master's lecture to the lodge, and that's a bit of a test of merit to show to your brethren that you've taken the time to find out around about a Masonic subject that's of interest to you, and you can stand up and present it to them. One of my concerns, one of my great mentors in Freemasonry is my father. He's in his mid-80s. He's still an active office bearer in my mother lodge, but he lives out in the country, and he would have lost that connection. One of my other great friends from the small town that I live in here in Fife in Scotland, he's not as old as my dad, a decade or so younger, but he was out 5 nights a week, and he wasn't in the best of health, but I felt that we needed to still have something that we can connect to the brethren. So I instigated a weekly Zoom for my mother lodge with between half a dozen and a dozen of our own members. We meet, we talk lodge business, we ensure that we're keeping in touch with each other. But I felt that with the Lodge of Research, we needed to do something different. So I brought the members of that lodge together. We tested the technology to see if it would work one Sunday afternoon, and it worked. I've known Bob Cooper, the renowned Scottish Masonic historian, for many years. So I asked Bob if he would be prepared to come along and present one of his lectures to us, and he agreed. And Bob was our second Zoom meeting way back in late March 2019. Since then, I've been fortunate enough to persuade, I think, is the word, some really fantastic, well-known global Masonic speakers to come along on a weekly basis to the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee. In the early days, we were playing with the technology. We didn't fully understand it. So the first couple of meetings, there was some technological hitches. We didn't understand about muting everybody beforehand, but we very quickly got into it and we understood how to record people. And over the last 12 months, we've built up a bit of a pattern to how the Tuesday evening goes. So we welcome the Brethren in, we allow them to have a bit of conversation, a bit banter. Banter's a great word, and I think it's a big part of Freemasonry. It's not to do with the core values, but it's about that sense of fun and sense of brotherhood and sense of friendship that you can rib your pals and get away with it. And particularly when you're not seeing each other, it's a great release of emotions. So the Brethren get a chance to say hello, how you doing to each other, and have a bit of banter. We then call the meeting to order. We do some introductions. The Grand Lodge of Scotland very early on, through the Information and Communications Committee of the Grand Lodge, pulled together Zoom guidelines that we were involved in preparing. So we remind the Brethren about the Zoom guidelines. We've got a very active Facebook page, as you know, Claudio, and we encourage our brethren to sign a virtual tile, because I think it's important. If we're researching the history of Freemasonry, we know who's attended these meetings during this period of pandemic. So we encourage the brethren to sign the virtual tile, so we've got a record of who's attended. And I think we've had over 2,500 people attend our Zoom meetings over the last year. We then introduce the speaker. The speaker has the virtual floor, and they speak between 35 minutes and an hour, depending on their topic. And then we have a moderated question and answer session, which I then lead, and we ask the Brethren to put their questions into the chat. And that leads to great discussion that then follows on in the evening on our Facebook pages. And then after the speaker and the question and answer sessions, we allow the Brethren to unmute to say their thank yous and their good evenings to everyone. So all in all, the meeting runs for about an hour and a half every Tuesday night. The success of the meeting to me is threefold. It is the quality of the speaker and the topic that they present. It's very much the audience and the Brethren who attend and their participation. And I think the third part of the success of it is that camaraderie. It's continuing that fraternal connection on a weekly basis. There's now, we were the first, I believe. I've not found anybody else who was doing Zoom lectures before us. There's some other fantastic Zoom lecture series out there now, but I think we were certainly the first by a good few weeks. So there's other opportunities for Brethren to make their daily advancement, but we've certainly built up a great following, and I would suggest that 60% of our weekly audience are the same people. They come week in, week out. And I think it's that sense of camaraderie that they've developed together is the third part of the success of it. The thing that really highlighted it to me, that it was not only the daily advancement it was actually making, but it was the ability to break the social isolation during lockdown. Because if you look at the age of our membership, many of them are on their own. They're not getting a lot of interaction. They're stuck in their houses 24/7. And one of them in particular, no names, no pack drills, so to speak. I didn't think I would put on a Zoom meeting between Christmas and New Year period. I thought we'll give everyone a break. And I decided the week before to try and find someone, because someone passed in comment that they were going to miss that, and it was going to be a long 2 weeks until the next lecture. Mm-hmm. So I found I'd been trying to persuade Brother Lord Elgin's son, Adam Bruce, the Honourable Adam Bruce, to come and speak to us, and he agreed to come and speak in that intervening Tuesday between Christmas and New Year. Afterwards, I got this very touching and heartwarming email from a brother who let me know that sadly he'd lost his wife during the pandemic. I don't know what was the cause of her passing. However, he said that he really was not looking forward to Christmas, as we can all imagine. And he thanked me profusely for arranging the Tuesday meeting in between Christmas and New Year, because for many that's a very lonely and dark period, because you've got the excitement of the Christmas festivities, it then dies down, some people go back to work, and then you've got the build up, and in Scotland in particular, New Year's a very big thing for us. So normally you've had a lot of celebrations, and just that one email, knowing that I've been able to change that brother's life and give him a focus during that period of time, makes this all worthwhile. But there's so many other stories like that, Claudio, around that. We've brought Bren from all quarters of the globe, from not just Scottish Freemasonry, but we've met you, we've become friends with you, you're a regular attender. But we've got Bren from New Zealand to Chile. That's all the way around the globe. US, Canada, across Europe, South Africa, Hong Kong, Australia join us every week, and it's amazing to see what, as a very small lodge, we've been able to achieve. And as a lodge, I think we're so humbled that we've now got this, I think, good reputation on delivering a quality Masonic education. Your original question was, what does the Grand Lodge of Scotland think about this? I think the testimony is that the Grand Master Mason, most worshipful Grand Master Mason, Brother Ramsay McGee, was one of our speakers, and he came and spoke. So I think that gives the seal of approval to what we're doing. And when I look at the audience every week, we have many senior Grand Lodge of Scotland office bearers join in, which is very humbling that they feel that they've got the time to come and spend with us. We've got many provincial Grand Masters and past provincial Grand Masters, but probably more importantly, because I firmly believe we're all on the level, we've just got Bren like you and I coming every week to partake in that daily advancement. So it's been a journey over the last 14 months, Claudio. I've made a commitment that until we get back to whatever the new normal is, the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee will continue providing a weekly Zoom meeting on a Tuesday evening. Perversely, we want to stop doing this because we want to get back to our normal Freemasonry, where we are face-to-face with our Bren, we're initiating new candidates into the craft, and we're taking them on their personal journey. But our commitment is that we will continue. And because of the success of it, very early on, many people were saying, I can't get to that tonight, I'm working, or I've got something else on, can you record them? And we had been recording them from day one. So we set up our YouTube channel, which has now had over 15,000 views, which is really, really incredible. And so I spend a Tuesday evening after the meeting downloading onto the system and then uploading onto YouTube that night's speaker. But that's enabled us to gain a new audience, particularly out with our time zone, because it's not always easy for someone to come along 7 o'clock GMT time to it. So we've also embraced technology during this period of time. In terms of how I find the speakers, I've been in the craft 32 years now. Yes, I had an easy paper round. I still look relatively young, and I think I will continue to be young, Claudio, because I celebrated my 50th birthday during lockdown, and to me, because we were in lockdown, it didn't happen. So I'm forever going to be 49 in my mind, at the very least. But lockdown has given me the time to use the internet, to use my library of Masonic books that you can see over my shoulder, which is nearly as impressive as your library of books behind you. I'm very jealous. And listening to other lecture series, we're both members of the Internet Lodge under the United Grand Lodge of England. I've managed to persuade some of their speakers to come along to present to us, but I felt that the topics needed to be more generic. I didn't really want them to talk about the mysteries and the secrets of our ancient craft, because that's a personal journey that you go on, and I believe that that's for your own lodge to take you on that journey and explain that to you, because every lodge, particularly in Scotland, works their ceremonies in a slightly different way. The meaning's always the same and the core premise is the same, but everybody does it slightly different. So I wanted it to showcase maybe the generalities of Freemasonry, and maybe some of the lectures would be available to prospective members of the craft to show who were showing an interest, and we would be able to show to them, we're a great bunch of guys, we do great things. Look at some of the history of Freemasonry in other parts of the world that we as Scottish Freemasons might not readily know about. So we had Brother Oscar Allen introducing us to Prince Hall Freemasonry, for example, which is something that we don't have in the UK. We had a brother from Australia introducing us to the history and the development of Freemasonry in what was that colony, and how it grew, and how the Australian gold rush impacted on Freemasonry. So they're very generic, very historic types of subjects. We've had a few speakers talking on the more esoteric elements of Freemasonry, and some of the feedback from some of my brethren was that was a bit deep. That was possibly too deep for me. And it was going over my head. And for many brethren, that's fine when you look at the esoteric side. So what we did, we decided to host a weekend online symposium where we brought 5 of the globe's leading esoteric speakers. So we focused it on that. And when I look at the YouTube channel, that has been our most popular YouTube recording that has had the most repeat views. So there's certainly a space for the esoteric, but the learning I found was for the weekly Zoom, keep it to something that's of interest. We had a brother who's a TV celebrity, for want of a better description, in the UK, Mark Smith from the Antiques Roadshow. He came and talked about his passion, the Victoria Cross, and the story of the Victoria Cross, and how there is a Masonic understory to that. And as you know, Claudia, that's one of my passions, and I've researched the Victoria Cross and Freemasonry, and we've tried to open and explore the military connection. Bob Bashford, one of Ireland's leading researchers who's got a global name in Masonic research circles, came and spoke to us about the Irish military travelling warrants. And that was a really interesting subject for many of the veterans. Andreas Onifers, the master of Quater Coronati, the premier lodge of research in the world, as they say, came and talked to us about the Swedish Rite, again, a system of Freemasonry that we don't have in the UK. And because of the growing, I would say, yes, success, I'm trying to be relatively humble in this, but yeah, it has been a success. The more successful we get, the more well known around the globe we get, the easier to find the speakers. So we've been very fortunate to attract 3 Prestonian lecturers to come and speak to us. We've had a couple of Cornwallis lecturers from the United Grand Lodge of England come and speak to us, and that's really, really pleasing for me, because it makes my life a lot easier. I do try to have I have my Hope Future diary of presentations. It's a Word document that's a living document that I try to keep up to date in about 7 to 8 weeks in advance, so I know who's going to speak in that period of time. So it's constantly evolving, and if someone suggests a subject, I will then try to find a speaker for that subject. You may recall a few weeks ago we had Robert Marshall from Waco Lodge in Texas speak to us about the Alamo. That was from a request before Christmas from one of our audience saying, "Gordon, love to hear about the Masonic connections." So I'll go and then I'll trawl the internet, look on the lodges that I follow on Facebook, and I look through the books that I've got to see if the author's still living, do they do presentations, and then I'll try to find an email and I'll put a cheeky request out saying, please come along. And I think I've only had one refusal to date, and that was simply because the brother in question, his calendar just would not marry up with a Tuesday night. And so if we were to choose the Tuesday night, we may be able to get him back. But we've made that Tuesday night our own now. And I think people work around that Tuesday night being, I'm going to the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Gordon, how much time do you spend organizing these fantastic Zoom meetings? I noticed also you are always prepared with a backup solution in case of the guest cannot join the meeting, as we remember.
I've got a very busy professional life, and in many ways, the pandemic Freemasonry for me has been my decompress. I normally work in Edinburgh, and I used to have at least an hour's commute each way, and that was my time to switch off from work head to family head to home life to Masonic life. And during the pandemic, I've found that my team are all working from home. Everyone that we have any business relationships are working from home. So I'm spending my life in front of this computer. I'm spending 10 hours a day in this garage. This is my garage that I've converted into an office. And I needed something that I could then switch off. And my passion is, I love my Freemasonry, I always have. And I've always loved the research element of it and understanding and asking questions. So my wife would tell you that I spend far too much time on the Zoom presentations. But on the flip of that coin, she's saying, I wish you'd be back out at meetings as well, because we're in this house 24/7, and all my working life I've traveled or I've been at Freemason meetings in the evening. So we've had that really good balance. And she's very happy for me to disappear through here into the garage. So in terms of time, I probably spend at least 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day on Masonic research for my own interest, and preparing for our weekly Zoom meetings, because I also try to ensure that our Lodge Hope of Kurrachee Facebook page is putting out relevant content on a daily basis as well. So so you might see a post early in the morning from me, or middle of the night, quite often middle of the day at lunchtime. If I take a break, I'll have a look at the Facebook and put something on. And I think on a Tuesday, I settled down at this desk about 6:20, and I'm at the desk until about 9. I then go through to my living room, watch some TV with the wife. I have a bit of blether with her, and during that time, the videos uploading to the YouTube channel, and then hopefully about 11:30, 11:45, I'm able then to share that on our Facebook pages. So on a Tuesday evening, it really is 6 hours dedicated to it, and other evenings it's about 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, and probably what's depending on what's on the telly just now, because there's not a lot else we can do because we're in lockdown. So I need something that keeps my mind active. And in terms of the backup, yeah, that was a lesson I picked up on from the second meeting, when the speaker's broadband was having technical challenges, and I felt, wow, what if that really happens? And he was able to continue and give us the whole presentation. I said, but what happens if he does lose his internet, or he doesn't appear one evening? I've got nearly 100 people here waiting for a presentation. Thankfully, because to become the Master of Lodge Hope of Kurrachee, you have to have a lecture prepared. So I had that one. And I'd been doing, over the last few years, research on Freemasonry and remembrance, because in my professional life, I'm head of fundraising and learning for Poppy Scotland, which is part of the Royal British Legion Group. So we look after remembrance in in Scotland, and it's a very humbling position that I hold, one that we're the guardians of remembrance, and remembrance and Freemasonry's got a lot of connections. Errol Haig, who was the father of our remembrance, was a Freemason. My mother lodge is actually named Errol Haig in his honour, because we're from a small town called Windigates, which was the town around the Haig family distillery of Cameron Bridge. So I feel that I've got a lot of connection with him. I've actually got his first cavalry sword just off screen here that I've used in my presentations. So I researched the connection with Freemasonry remembrance. I've done a lot of research into the military connections with Freemasonry, because in my young life, when I left school, I joined the Royal Air Force and I served Her Majesty for 8 years. So I've got a personal interest, being a veteran and a Freemason, in that connection. And so I had a couple of lectures that were there just in case, ready to go. And over the course of the last couple of years, I've presented 2 or 3 of them as backups, or if we've put on a special meeting. So we put on a special meeting for the commemorations of VE Day, and that was a military themed one. But just in case, and touch wood, Claudio, it doesn't happen, I do have a couple of others up my sleeve that if the presenter doesn't appear, I can share my screen and I can talk for half an hour or so. And as you know, we have a bit of fun with the Bren, sort of threatening them that I'm going to be their speaker that evening. So they've to listen to me rabbit on for an hour or so instead of my normal 10 minutes either end of the presentation. So yeah, it's important to have that backup, and I think that comes from my work and military background. You have to prepare. If you don't prepare, you will fail. And we've got people looking forward to our Tuesday evening, and so I've got a responsibility as the host to have some sort of backup, because I really don't want any evening to say to our audience at 7:15, sorry guys, this is not happening this evening.
Indeed. Gordon, please give us a short history of Hope of Kurrachee Lodge, please.
And the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee it's got a really interesting history. We were the first Scottish lodge founded in India. And I was actually in South Africa virtually last night, where one of our guest lecturers, Ian McIntosh, was talking about the Burness family, Robert Burns's of Montrose, Robert Burns's cousins. And there's 2 famous cousins of Burns, Burness, Alexander and James, who went out, and Burness was the first provincial Grand Master in Western India, and the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee was the first Scottish lodge set up in India. And we had a very successful tenure, and we initiated men of originally we came from a military lodge from the 32nd Cheshire Regiment, and then it developed into being the first Scottish lodge, and it continued meeting up until about 1973, 71, 72 in Kurrachee. We've had some really famous members. Richard Burton of Arabian Nights fame was a member of our lodge. One of a famous Masonic character from our province, the Reverend Robin Trotter, was a member, and he's very important in the story of the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee. So during our time in what was originally India, prior to the Second World War, Robin Trotter became a past master, and Hope of Kurrachee was his mother lodge. But after partition, Kurrachee became is in Pakistan, and in the early 70s, the Bhutto government outlawed Freemasonry, so the lodge went into darkness. And when a Scottish lodge goes into darkness, other lodges have if someone's looking to set up a new lodge, we've got the opportunity to repone that lodge. But part of the deal, for want of a better phrase, with reponing the lodge, you need a couple of the original members to approve the reponement. And in the mid-80s, a variety of Bren came together. and they wanted to set up a research lodge in our province. And many of the overseas Scottish lodges that had went into dormancy have been since reponed as research lodges. Felix, Pioneer, for example, and we reponed the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee. One of my great Masonic mentors out with my mother lodge is a chap called John Kurrachee. He is my deputy master currently of the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee, and a past master of Lodge Hope of Kurrachee. And he was the driving force behind the reponement of the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee in 1988. And since 1988, we've travelled through a variety of Masonic centres in Fife and Kinross to be in our current home in Rosyth, just north of Edinburgh, next to the naval base and just over the iconic Forth bridges. And the lodge has, over the years, attracted many influential Masonic researchers. And in the late 90s, we were really on a roll, and we were the first lodge that set up an international conference on Freemasonry, which was the forerunner of ICHF that many others had. So we had the likes of Prescott there. We had lots of other big names from Kurrachee came along to it. And things evolve and develop in a lodge, and people leave and people join because it's a second lodge to your mother lodge that you're supporting. And as we continued on our sojourn in France, the lodge has had an up and down career, and that took us through to 2018-19 when I became master. And it'd always been one of those bucket list things in my Masonic career. I always felt that I would one day like to ascend to the chair of King Solomon in the Lodge of Hope of Kurrachee because of my passion for Masonic research. And I was able to do that. I did think it would only be for a year because your tenure is normally a year. That's me now been master for 2 years, and as my immediate past master reminded me, I've actually hosted the equivalent of 20 years worth of Lodge Hope of Kurrachee meetings because we've now had 60 lectures. We normally do 3 lectures per year, so I'm feeling that I'm a 20-year-old past master of the lodge sort of thing, but my enthusiasm has not dimmed over the last year with it. And so when we look at the history of the lodge, coming from a military travelling warrant through the development, being the first lodge of Scottish Freemasonry in India, and see the massive growth of Freemasonry across that continent is something that we're really proud of. We regularly, members of the lodge, attend some of the Zoom meetings held in India, and at one of the last physical meetings that we had, past District Grand Master of the District Grand Lodge of Scottish District Grand Lodge in India, Brother Bommy Mehta, we were able to arrange for him to come to the lodge and be our guest speaker. And on that evening, we made him an honorary member. And that was just a way of keeping that connection between that first Scottish lodge in India that is now having a successful second life in the Provincial Grand Lodge of Fife and Kinross. And it kept that tie back to our origins. And Bommy is a regular attender and a regular communicator and a contributor on our Facebook pages. So for us as a lodge, it's really nice that we've still got that connection back to our home. And the sort of 20 years that we were in darkness, I think we remember our previous life in what is now Pakistan. And I think that part of what drives us to educate and help Bren with our daily advancement, that we've got such a checkered history that needs to be remembered. And this is a way of ensuring that our history is remembered, other places' histories are remembered. We just saw from Brother Alexander Gilbraith on Tuesday past, one of Scotland's smallest provinces, 9 lodges, the history that that province has got since 1728, and it's such a varied province. And I think when globally there is an idea that UGLE are the founders and the guardians of speculative Freemasonry, but as we've been able to show, because we've known it forever, the Scotland is the birthplace of modern day Freemasonry. We've got the history, we've got the stories to tell, we've got the development, we've got the firsts, and I think Zoom technology and these types of meetings have allowed us to shout a little bit more about that history. Yes, we've had Bob Cooper telling the world that for years and years and years, but he's been a lone voice pretty much. But this technology has allowed us to really put Scottish Freemasonry back where it belongs, as the cradle, I like to call it, of Freemasonry. And I do joke with my brethren from Kilwinning and Mary's Chapel that it was actually the province of Fife and Kinross that is the true cradle of Freemasonry, because William Shaw is buried with us in Dunfermline Abbey, and Dunfermline was the historic capital of Scotland going way back. So I can't prove that. I don't have the minutes that Aitchison's Haven have and Mary's Chapel have, but that comes back to that banter I was talking about earlier, Claudio. It's always good to wind up Tom Wood and Ewan Rutherford about that and that history, but that's what makes Scottish Freemasonry so beautiful. We've got so many stories, and it's not uniform. It's so colourful, and it's just, to me, it's a perfect form of Freemasonry. But that's my humble opinion as a Scottish Freemason.
Fantastic, thank you. You gave us already a few elements from your curriculum vitae. Please insist. Tell us about you, more about you.
I think, Claudia, you already appreciated it. I like talking. And that's part of me. Is I'm a people person. I love meeting people. I love working with people, and I've worked since I was 12, 13-year-old. I think my parents put in that work ethic into me, that you don't get anything out of life unless you put into it. And it's not about taking things or taking the credit for anything. You have to work for it. And I went through high school. I decided that I didn't want to go to university, but I wanted to serve my country. And I joined the Royal Air Force as a young 17-year-old. I got on the train here from a small town here in Markinch, and I disappeared down to deepest Englandshire. Never really been that far away on my own before. We'd been on the sort of the package holidays to Mallorca and that with mum and dad and that sort of stuff, but never been away on my own. And I had such a great time in the Royal Air Force. I loved every minute of it. I was fortunate to serve in Cyprus and Germany, down south. And my last tour of duty was back home at RAF Lookers here in Fife. I met my wife who's a local lass to where I am here. And I jokingly said to her, if I get posted overseas, we'll get engaged. 4 weeks later, my draft note came in to post me to Germany. So she rightly said, well, if you're going overseas for a year, you're putting a ring on my finger. And 32 years later, well, last weekend, we celebrated our 29th wedding anniversary. And I've got 2 lovely daughters as a product of our now relatively long marriage. We were just saying, can't believe it's nearly 30 years. And then she did reply, and she says, in the last 14 months have been the longest, because we've been under the same roof for 24/7, because I've always travelled with my work. And so, and then the there was a time when there was what was called options for change in the military in the UK, and there was a reduction in the number of serving men and women. And in 1995, I came out of the Air Force, and I started on my career within the charitable sector in the UK, and I became a fundraiser for a cancer charity based in St Andrews. To be a fundraiser, Claudio, you only need two things. You need a big mouth, and I think I've demonstrated that to you tonight and over the last year. Someone that you can communicate and you can ask for help, ask for money to help your beneficiaries. And the second thing that I need in my armory as a fundraiser is a hard neck, and that's to take the rejections, because you get a lot more no's than you do yeses in our game. And over the last 26 years, I've worked on what we term charity side, that's working directly for a charity, or agency side. But the most of my career was on agency side, and I was privileged to end up in a role with the very grand title of International Commercial Director for one of the globe's largest fundraising agencies. And my role was setting up franchise businesses for the organisation all around the world, from Australia, Spain, Netherlands, Sweden, Ireland, the US and Canada. So for 5 years, I spent 2-3 weeks a month traveling, managing staff overseas, and setting up new countries for the business. Which was fantastic, and it really benefited my Freemasonry as well, because I always packed my regalia. Because as many of your audience will appreciate, if you're a traveling businessman, it's a lonely place, because you're on your own, you're in hotels, you have to make your own entertainment. But Freemasonry was an outlet, and I was able to make connections through the Grand Lodge of Scotland, through recognised other Grand Lodges, to go and visit. And over the years, I've really enjoyed many visits across the world. I think my favourite visit, however, was to a lodge in Barcelona, where the degree was in Catalan. Very few of the brethren spoke English, but I got such a warm welcome. And I had a splattering of Castile Spanish through the work and understanding of it, but I could never say that I could speak the language. But the brethren there were so welcoming, and then understanding the way that they did their degrees. So the brother come in, he was initiated, he would get passed for at least a year, and he had to write a paper on his views about it. So it was more esoteric in their understanding of it, whereas in Scotland, you're maybe more 1, 2, 3 through your degrees and you into office, etc. But that development, and the food at the festive board afterwards was magnificent. It really was. And the boys sent me on my way afterwards, and I walked the streets back to the hotel, having had just such a wonderful night. But what really struck me was that must be about 15 years ago now. So the memory of Franco, it still looms large in their minds in Spain. But as you know, Freemasonry was banned under the Franco regime as well. And these guys were so passionate about reigniting that light of Freemasonry in Spain. And I've seen the development over the years now, how it's becoming more and more widespread within Spain. But those Catalan brethren were just fantastic and very welcoming to a relatively young Freemason traveling for work. So I was on agency side for nearly 18 years, and as I said earlier, Claudio, I am a veteran, and I'd been volunteering with Poppy Scotland, and an opportunity to become head of fundraising came along. So 5 years ago, I applied for the job and I moved from agent, and I was lucky enough, I was appointed head of fundraising and learning at Poppy Scotland. And I've been there for the last 5 years and seen some really special things, because we've went through some major anniversaries with the 100 years of the ending of the Great War, 75th anniversary of VE Day, the 80th anniversary of Dunkirk, the anniversary of St. Valerie, and I've had a hand in crafting and creating all these commemorations with the team. Designing, tweaking the design for the Scottish poppy for the commemoration and putting it in gold emboss 1918 to 2018 on it. And it's the first time that the Scottish poppy had been tweaked in nearly 100 years, because this year we celebrate the 100th year of our nation's symbol of remembrance. So I feel very humble to have the role of one of the guardians in Scotland of this beautiful and simple little flower, the poppy that grew out of the battlefields, that grew a sense of hope and regeneration. And many of those views, I think, are very Masonic, that what this poppy symbolises. And that came from Madame Guerin when she met Errol Haig, and he saw what she was doing, and Professor Michelle, when she was over visiting the battlefields and taking the poppy idea to America, because it was the Americans that first wore the poppy after the war and sold it to raise money for the disabled troops. And through to today, where we've been renovating the poppy factory in Edinburgh, that still employs disabled veterans who make the Scottish poppy by hand. So it's a great privilege to work in this environment. And the money that I help raise, along with my team and the 10,000 volunteers that I'm privileged to work with every day, raise so much money to change the lives of those that have served their country. Be they having physical challenges or mental health challenges. So I do believe I've got the dream job, and it's a job that I wake up every morning wanting to get involved in. And I'm very lucky to have seen some events, some very humbling events. A dawn service in Arras in 2017, the battlefield in Arras, that was where the Canadians and the Scots all came together to fight the Germans in one of the great battles of the war. But the Battle of Arras is the largest congregation of Scottish soldiers in Scotland's history in one place at one time. And going there and taking school kids there and being part of the school tours that were out there, and then being part of the beating retreat in Arras Town Centre Square, where the locals came out and they're still thanking those who'd served. And we had the band of the Royal Regiment of Scotland and the pipes and drums. And I remember, God, I opened the gate to allow them into the square to march on. And myself, I was kilted. I was wearing my Legion Scotland Glengarry. And pride's not a good thing, it's avarice. And I just, the hairs on the back of my neck were just standing up. We're letting that magnificent cacophony of sound into that parade square to commemorate what had happened in that area 100 years before. Something very, very special, and I'm very lucky to be in this role that I get to attend those very special things. And then when I look at the history of my work, I see through it the silver thread of Freemasonry. When I look at the participants from Field Marshal Errol Haig, Lady Dorothy Haig, his wife, who founded the Scottish Poppy Factory, the Lady Haig Poppy Factory, she was a female Freemason. The first chairman of the Lady Haig Poppy Factory, James Robertson, Victoria Cross, he was a Freemason. The people behind, the landed gentry behind the Scottish National War Memorial, 70% of them were Freemasons. And I really believe that the Masonic principles that we believe in and hold very dear are the principles that underpin remembrance in what I would term as Commonwealth countries. that were on the side of Great Britain in those two wars. So it's a very special place, and it's a place that I think once you're in, you don't really want to leave. And we have a saying about people who get very engrossed in their work in the UK that if you break them in half, they're like a stick of Blackpool rock. The organisations, the name of it's through your torso, just like a stick of Blackpool rock. You can see Blackpool written all the way through the rock. So I'm very, very lucky to do what I do, Claudio, and I'm lucky that it allows me to travel throughout Scotland, meet some very passionate, interesting people, and we can help. And ultimately, beneficence, the lessons of our degrees comes through in what I do. And we've got a lovely saying in the Legion. The motto is service, not self. And to me, that is very Masonic. And I do not believe that Freemasonry is a charitable organisation, but I think it has charity at its core values. I've fundamentally believe that we Freemasonry is a personal journey of discovery. But the analogy I was thinking about before coming on today is very much Freemasonry to me is like a football team. You need the team, but you need the individuals to be good at what they're doing. And the individuals have to constantly practice and learn their craft to ensure that they're part of the wider team. So to me, that analogy of between a lodge and a Masonic football team, as a football team, works really well, because if someone in the lodge is not practiced and is not engaged, they will let down that wider team. So you need the individuals and you need the team for our Freemasonry to flourish. And I'm very privileged that in my mother lodge, Lodge Earl Hague, 1260, we've got a great team. And in the Lodge Hope of Kurrachee, our research lodge, we've got a great team, all built up of individuals who have dedicated their life to what they're doing, but gives us a success. And really, over pandemic, has dragged us even closer together, if that could be possible, because we've had to learn how to interact in a different way.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Gordon. Thank you very much indeed for being as you are, and for this Zoom meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for asking me to come along and represent my two lodges, be a representative of my province that I'm very proud of, the Provincial Grand Lodge of Fife and Kinross, and in a strange way, I represent the Grand Lodge of Scotland and all what Scottish Freemasonry is about. Thank you.
I thank you. Thank you so much.